You don't need to check your bank account to feel it. The relentless climb in rent, utility bills that used to be annoying but now feel terrifying, the grocery cart that costs more every single month. Millions of Americans wake up, go to work, commute home, all while asking themselves the same painful question. A young woman saves money every paycheck, only to pull it right back out for gas and groceries. A man works 6 days a week, spends 4 hours a day commuting, and admits he can't afford the things that make him happy anymore. Families stare at $600 electric bills and wonder what they did wrong. The truth is, they didn't do anything wrong. Wages aren't keeping up, the basics cost more than ever, and the gap between surviving and actually living has never been wider. This video isn't just about data, it's about the real lives behind the numbers. The generational divide. The rules have changed. When you listen to young Americans talk, what you notice isn't laziness or unrealistic expectations. It's exhaustion. A woman in her 20s responding to older commenters telling her to work harder, put it bluntly, things aren't the same anymore. You guys ruined this country. She's onto something. The economic landscape has fundamentally shifted. Back in the late 70s and 80s, wages and housing costs moved together. You could buy a house in your 20s without a six-figure income or a decade of saving. A college degree didn't saddle you with debt that followed you into middle age. Healthcare, childcare, car loans. All of it was significantly lower relative to income. Today, adjusted for inflation, the average worker earns about the same as they did in 1979, while the cost of basic living has exploded by over 70%. This isn't about blaming any one generation. It's about acknowledging that America's financial foundation has changed. Easy credit and low interest rates drove up asset prices. Corporate consolidation means a handful of companies control the essentials we can't walk away from. The result is a psychological disconnect. People are told to follow in their parents' footsteps. Work hard, stay disciplined about saving, make smart choices. But the math no longer backs up that promise. The bar for entry into middle-class stability has risen faster than wages, opportunities, and hope. The housing crisis, can't buy, can't rent. For millions of Americans, the housing crisis is that moment when you're sitting in your car after a long shift asking yourself how you're going to make rent next month. A woman in Florida pays $1,300 in rent, $650 for her car payment, $300 for insurance, plus utilities and groceries. Her voice shakes as she says, "It's either I eat or I pay my bills. And even then, I'm thinking about which bill I'm going to be late on this month." This isn't mismanagement. This is housing costs outpacing what the average American paycheck can cover. The national median home price sits around $410,000 to $420,000, nearly 6 times the median household income. That ratio used to be 3 to 1, and it's doubled in a generation, making homeownership a matter of luck as much as effort. Renting has become a struggle too. A typical one-bedroom apartment now averages around $1,500 a month nationally, lower than the 2022 peak, but still about 15% higher than pre-pandemic. In cities like San Diego, New York, Boston, and Miami, that same apartment easily hits $2,500 to $3,000. Housing hasn't cooled off. It's just settled into a new, expensive normal. Why is this happening? For years, America hasn't built enough homes. Construction slowed after the 2008 crash and never fully recovered. Meanwhile, mortgage rates climbed from historic lows to 6 to 7%, locking out first-time buyers. Investors, from individual landlords to massive institutional buyers, snapped up tens of thousands of homes, turning starter houses into rental inventory. In states like Florida and Texas, climate risk has sent property insurance skyrocketing. The impact isn't just financial, it's generational. The average age of a first-time homebuyer is now mid-30s, the highest it's ever been. Renting has become a permanent state for many. Without home equity, the wealth gap widens. The hidden costs, a second rent. For many Americans, the shock doesn't come from rent or the mortgage. It comes from everything around it, the bills you can't avoid. One woman shared her electric bills from a brutal Texas summer. $560 in June, $650 in July, with August projected to push the 3-month total over $2,000. She's not running a mansion, she's not wasting power. She's cutting back everywhere, cooking at home, avoiding unnecessary purchases, and it still isn't enough. While her bills are extreme, they reflect a national trend. On paper, average electric bills run around $150 a month, but that collapses under real-world conditions. In states with long heat waves, aging grid systems, or heavy air conditioning use, $400 to $600 bills during peak months are common. Water bills have spiked sharply in many major cities. Broadband is now a near-mandatory household expense, and car insurance rates have surged nationwide. Each increase seems manageable on its own, but stacked together they create what feels like a second rent. Then there's the cost of getting to work. A man driving nearly 4 hours a day, working 6 days a week, realized he no longer has time or budget to enjoy simple things. The average monthly payment for a new car now tops $700, with many drivers paying over $1,000. Used cars aren't cheap either. Add insurance, gas, maintenance, and rising interest rates, and transportation has become one of the biggest financial drains on a typical household. The deeper issue isn't just the price, it's the necessity. Most Americans don't have reliable public transit. They can't choose not to own a car. The commute trap reinforces the cycle. You need the car to make money, but most of the money goes right back into the car. Groceries, the unavoidable expense. If there's one place the cost of living crisis hits every single American, it's the grocery store. You can negotiate rent, delay car repairs, cancel a vacation, or cut streaming services, but you can't stop eating. A young woman said she tries to save money every paycheck, setting a little aside, promising not to touch it. 2 days later, she's pulling it back out. Not for luxuries, not for impulse buys, but for food, gas, the basics. Every time I put money away, I end up needing it for essentials. That's not bad planning. That's a sign the essentials themselves are too expensive. The data backs this up. According to government food plans, a single adult today typically spends $300 to $400 a month on groceries, depending on the city and diet plan. Even after pandemic peaks passed, prices continue climbing at about 2 to 3% annually. Food inflation never fully reversed, it just slowed on a higher baseline. But it's not just the prices, it's the type of food people can access. In many communities nationwide, particularly low-income or rural areas, major grocery stores have closed or consolidated, leaving behind food deserts. Residents have to rely on convenience stores, dollar stores, or fast food chains. Fresh produce is harder to find and more expensive, while processed foods remain cheap. Families trying to save money end up buying what's affordable instead of what's healthy. That creates a hidden cost. Eating cheap today can mean paying more later through higher medical bills, lower energy levels, and stress. The grocery bill becomes a source of anxiety rather than nourishment. The credit trap, surviving on borrowed money. For a growing number of Americans, survival isn't paid in cash anymore. It's financed. Not because people are chasing luxuries, but because the basic cost of living has outpaced what wages can cover. One creator laid out her monthly bills: rent, electric, water, car payment, car insurance, groceries, and gas. Then she asked the question many families whisper at their kitchen tables: which one can I skip this month and catch up on later? Credit cards become the buffer, but they come with a cost. Last year, American households pushed total credit card balances above $1.2 trillion, an all-time high. Average interest rates now exceed 22%, meaning any balance carried month to month grows faster than most people can pay it down. A $5,000 balance, if only minimum payments are made, can easily turn into thousands more in interest alone. Most people carrying these balances aren't doing it for vacations or gadgets. Surveys show nearly half of cardholders use credit to cover necessities: groceries, rent gaps, utility bills, or an unexpected car repair. Medical expenses only make it worse. Even with insurance, high deductibles and out-of-pocket costs force families onto credit for routine care. Over time, these cycles create a quiet pattern. Debt becomes normalized, interest becomes expected, and financial breathing room disappears. Meanwhile, wages struggle to keep pace. When income stagnates but prices rise, debt fills the gap. It becomes a tool people lean on not because they want to, but because they have to. The mental toll, the fading American dream. When you hear Americans talk about the rising cost of living, there's a moment when the conversation stops being about money and becomes something heavier. People admit they're tired, the kind of tired sleep can't fix. One creator described his routine: working 6 days a week, driving nearly 4 hours a day, with no time or energy left for the simple things he enjoys. Research shows most Americans report feeling stressed about finances every single day. Even when people do everything right, budget carefully, work overtime, cut non-essential spending, they still feel like the ground is shifting beneath them. This isn't personal failure. It's what happens when you're living in an economy where the cost of stability is climbing faster than most people can afford to pay. The emotional impact is real. Financial stress affects relationships, family dynamics, and long-term planning. Parents worry about raising children. Young people question whether they'll ever afford a house. Workers wonder if they'll ever reach a point where they're not playing catch-up. This is where the American dream enters the conversation, not as nostalgia, but as a measure of how expectations have shifted. For decades, the promise was simple: work hard, make good decisions, and life will gradually get better. That promise now feels more fragile. Homeownership is delayed by a decade, savings accounts don't grow fast enough, and economic mobility has slowed. Yet even facing these challenges, many Americans still hold onto the belief that matters most. Life shouldn't just be about barely scraping by. They want time with family, room to breathe, the ability to plan for the future. Not perfection, just stability. That desire itself is proof that hope hasn't disappeared. It's just become harder to reach under the weight of today's economy. The bottom line: when you step back and look at everything together, the housing squeeze, rising utility bills, grocery store sticker shock, reliance on credit, and the stress it puts on people, it's clear this isn't just an economic story. It's a human one. The cost of living in America in 2025 isn't measured just in dollars. It's measured in stress, lost time, and the dreams people keep pushing off because basic needs consume so much of what they have. But understanding this system doesn't mean accepting it. It means recognizing that these pressures aren't personal failures. They're structural barriers millions are facing simultaneously. The real question now is, which part of this reality hits closest to your life? Housing, food, debt, or just that feeling of running hard to stay in place?